Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Hello everyone, welcome to Nerd Mela. I am Brahmavadini and joining us over the phone is Shekhar.
Hello.
Shekhar is on the phone because we are practicing social distancing due to the coronavirus. And as we all know by now, coronavirus is a pandemic, and almost half the world's population is dealing with it right now. And we also know that coronavirus causes a disease which has been termed COVID-19. And COVID-19 is actually part of a group of diseases which are known as zoonotic diseases, which is what we will be talking about in today's episode. Which brings us to the first question: what are zoonotic diseases?
So, zoonotic diseases are basically the many kinds of illnesses that pass from animals to humans. And these diseases, also called as zoonoses, they can be transmitted in many ways. Say, for example, like animal or insect bites. You can take that example of rabies or Zika. And it can also spread via petting or otherwise handling sick animals. And these zoonotic diseases, they are also transmitted by eating undercooked meat or consuming contaminated water.
So, some of the zoonotic diseases are quite benign, uh, but there are many which are quite harmful. An example of this would be Lyme disease. And of course, as we are seeing with COVID, some of the zoonotic diseases are quite deadly also.
Yes.
So, and of course, COVID-19 would be the most recent zoonotic disease. But in the last 2 decades or so, because of increased globalization and pressure on natural resources, there has been an increased transmission of these zoonotic diseases as well. So, what we'll do right now is we will take a look at some of the zoonotic diseases which have caused an alarm in the world, and especially in the last 2 decades.
Yeah. And the first diseases that we would take a look at are part of the coronavirus family. And the most recent one, of course, is the COVID-19, which is said to have originated in a Chinese wet market, which is basically a form of a meat market. And it is believed that COVID-19 was initially transmitted from a bat to a pangolin and then ultimately to humans.
And very similar to this was SARS, which
Yes.
affected around 26 countries in 2003. And SARS too originated in a Chinese wet market, and it is also caused by an animal virus. It's actually not yet certain what animal it was, but there are indications that it was a bat, and then that too spread to another animal, and that animal infected humans.
Yeah.
And like COVID-19, SARS also spreads through person to person contact.
Yeah. And the next disease would be the MERS, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome disease. It occurred, it is very similar to SARS, and it happened a decade later. And it started around 2012 and continued till mid 2015. And in the case of MERS, the host species was a camel, and it spread through the West Asian region, which resulted in around 400 deaths.
Yeah, so these were the coronavirus category of zoonotic diseases. The second category, which has infected many people in the last 2 decades, it is the H1 group. And the most common disease of this group is the bird flu, which was caused by the H5N1 strain of virus. And
Yeah.
this is found in birds. And there have been several outbreaks of this disease over the last 20 years in Asia. And the most prominent one in India would be the case in 2006, which resulted in mass culling of poultry birds.
And while the bird flu disease was focused more around the Asia region, the other flu disease, the H1N1 swine flu pandemic, it had a more wide scale impact. In 2009, this disease affected as many as 1.4 billion people across the world, and in total killed around 1 to 5 lakh people. And it is believed that swine flu was caused by a new strain of H1N1 virus that originated in Mexico.
Yes, and then the others, we would club them together, the other zoonotic diseases which have affected the world in the last 20 years. The first one among them would be Ebola virus,
Yeah.
And this disease hit West Africa between 2014 and 16, and as many as 28,000 people were affected, and almost 11,000 of them died due to the disease.
Yes.
And this too, Ebola too, is said to have originated among bats and then spread to humans.
Among the more recent diseases, we have the Zika virus disease, which is still a threat even now. And it initially originated in 2015 and affected large portions of South America and North America till November 2016. The disease, it spreads through the mosquito Aedes genus, and it is also a sexually transmitted disease and is even reported to have been transmitted from mother to child during pregnancy.
Hmm.
Then we have the Nipah virus, which was first reported in 1998 in Malaysia, and later on the infection by Nipah virus saw major outbreaks in Bangladesh and in India. And most recent ones were reported in Kerala in 2018 and 19. And in the first outbreak that took place in 2018, 17 people died in Kerala. And it is reported that the virus originated from fruit bats.
Yes, and lastly, but not very recent disease would be AIDS, which is caused by HIV, and it was first reported in 1981 and has been one of the most widespread diseases in the history. And till 2018, it is reported that over 37.9 million people across the world were affected by HIV/AIDS. And like Zika, it is also a sexually transmitted disease, and it is believed that the virus originated from a chimpanzee and then it was transmitted to human beings.
Yeah.
So, what we've seen so far is that zoonotic diseases which spread from animals to human beings have been there for a very long time, but in the last 20 years or so, there has been increased cases or increased number of infections or increased number of zoonotic diseases in the world.
Yeah.
So the next question that comes up is that why has there been a rise in the spread or the number of zoonotic diseases?
Yeah. One of the major reasons would be the increased man-animal interaction, which has happened because of overexploitation of natural resources and the destruction of natural habitat. And what happens is that in an undisturbed ecosystem, viruses keep circulating in mild forms among different animals. And when this equilibrium is disturbed, these animals come in contact with humans. And as a result, some viruses cross the species barrier due to a mutation, which leads to the infections in humans as well.
And when there is over exploitation of resources, like extensive over exploitation like logging or oil exploration or mining in deep forest areas, humans are exposed to novel pathogens, and it has been observed that large scale land use changes like deforestation has spurred many diseases, and most of these diseases they come from wildlife and not from domestic animals, and including the very well known diseases like HIV and Ebola.
Yeah. And another reason for this would be the mutation, which is basically the genetic changes in the virus strain. And the best example would be that of a swine flu, that the disease is very mild infection in pigs, but when it is mutated over to humans, it is very deadly.
Yeah, and since we spoke about the increased man animal interaction due to overexploitation of resources, the another angle that comes into play is that of climate change. An article in Down to Earth suggests that the rising temperature has raised the rate of reproduction in pathogens like bacteria, and which is why there is a greater risk of infection also.
Yeah.
And when we are talking about the increased rate of reproduction in pathogens, we have to talk about the rising antibiotic resistance also. Due to the liberal and improper use of antibiotics, these pathogens also develop antimicrobial resistance and lead to creation of something which are called superbugs, and there have been various studies over this in the last decade or so.
Yeah.
So we are seeing that there is a rise in the spread of infection and also a rise in the number of infections that humans are getting from animals. But there are certain epicenters of such kind of diseases. So we will see what these epicenters are and why is it so that these diseases are concentrated in these areas or originate in these areas.
Yeah.
So, the epicenter of a zoonotic disease would be anywhere where there is a close mixing of humans and animals. And it will also be where there is unregulated handling of blood and other body products or body fluids, due to which there is a greater chance of transmission of a virus from an animal to a human being.
And one of the major epicenters across the world is China, which is basically due to its wet markets. And these wet markets, they are present in other parts of the world as well, but they are quite prevalent in China. And also in these markets, you can even see a lot of wild animals that are available as well. And when we talk about these wet markets, there is a history behind it. In the 1960s, China shipped from an agricultural economy to an industrial one. It led to a widespread starvation and disease in the country. And as a result, around 18 million to 45 million people died back then. And to tackle the sudden food shortage during that time, several people started killing wild animals for food. And before that, it was just only a small portion of people in the southern part of China who consumed wild animals. But in the 1960s and 70s, farmers started to rear wild animals such as snakes, bats, and turtles for their own sustenance.
And then later in 1988, the Chinese government enacted the Protection of Wildlife Act, which encouraged domestication of wildlife. And this led to a development of an industry, of a wildlife rearing industry. And simultaneously, it also created illegal market for wild animals like tigers and pangolins. And so it is here that the SARS virus also originated, and it is also here where the COVID-19 is said to have originated. So after the SARS pandemic, the wet markets were temporarily shut and they were started after a couple of months or so. And again, in the view of the COVID pandemic, similar calls are being made now to shut the wet markets for good, because because right now also in China only a minority population consumes wildlife.
Yeah, and it is only an influential part of the Chinese society which consumes wild animals and exotic products made from their parts. And these people, they lobby with the Chinese government, which makes them even more reluctant to shut these markets for good.
See, but let's get back to the conversation. The other epicenter of zoonotic diseases that has come up is Africa, and here too the causes of outbreak have been man-made, but there is an additional reason as well. Over the last century, Africa has seen large-scale urbanization and deforestation. And of course, when forests are cut down, the human population comes in closer contact with the wild animals. And since we have seen so far, wild animals carry several viruses, which in turn makes humans vulnerable to several diseases. And when we take the example of Africa, there's one thing that has been noticed is that the predators that feed on rodents are the ones who lose their habitats first, because they are on the fringe of the forest as well as the human habitat. And this eventually leads to an explosion in the number of rodents, and who are the biggest carriers of zoonotic diseases.
Yeah. And like in China, wet markets are also common in several African countries. And these markets there are referred commonly to as bushmeat markets.
Yes, so these diseases are spread to human beings, and then when we talk about India, because of the high population density and poor sanitation levels, because we are a developing economy, it leads to these diseases becoming endemic in India. A very good example of this would be the H1N1, which we are sort of dealing with every year. So, what we've seen so far is that there is an increase in the number of zoonotic diseases in the last couple of decades, and also there are certain epicenters, and how India is quite susceptible to these infections. So, now the next thing that comes up is what are the lessons that we have learned from our past, and what we should do to ensure that such things do not become a major health crisis in our country.
Yeah. So the first thing would be rather very simple, which is respecting nature. And from our cultural practices, we understand that our forefathers knew a thing or two about zoonotic diseases. We can take the example of how common practices of cleanliness were maintained in cow sheds, pigsties, or in poultry farms.
Cleanliness is very, very important.
Yes. And then there is also a need to shift towards sustainable meat rearing practices. For example, the factory style rearing of chickens or bats in one-on-one stacked enclosure, they increase the tendency of virus transmission.
And when you say respect nature, we should also respect the private space of the animals as well.
And another important thing that we should do is to promote research in treating viral diseases. We can look at the examples of COVID-19 or HIV. Humans are yet to discover a treatment or a cure for these diseases.
And when we are talking about treatments, there are some diseases for which treatments are available. So, steps should be taken to maintain their effectiveness and also ensure that the animals or human beings are getting proper vaccination. Like we have rabies injections for pet dogs.
Yeah. And then there is also a need for scientific investigations in various different types of medicines. Like we can take the example of Ayush. And there has already been a microbiome research which has shown that there is merit to biotics, which is the core principles of Ayurveda. And also the ancient medicine system of China has been able to provide the world with anti-malarial medicines.
Yeah. So it is time that the proponents of Ayush in our country as well, they promote credible research in finding drugs so that Ayush as a medicine system can help other people and not just, further some kind of agenda.
Yes.
And when we are talking about this, we have to also mention that there has been this increased trend in using excess antibiotics. So we should discourage this use of antibiotic cleaners, which, when released in the wild, inoculate the pathogens against antibiotics and eventually lead to them developing resistance to it.
And we also have to strongly emphasize on sanitary practices. And here we are not trying to sound very ethnocentric or anything, but all the old civilizations, such as the Harappan or the ones in China or Greece, or even, for example, we can take the Turkish hammams, all of them are emphasized on sanitation in a big way. We have to ensure that proper sanitation is a very important part of our life.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And since we are taking the lessons of sanitation from the civilizations all across the world, we also have to understand that we have to share knowledge with each other on how to tackle with the disease or what to do to prevent such a disease from happening. Because whether we like it or not, we are all connected. So we have to look for global solutions and help each other in this time. And a very good example of this would be what Japan wrote in the relief packages that they sent to China. They wrote a Chinese poem which translates to something like, even though we live in different places, we all live under the same sky.
Yeah.
So, and we live in a world right now in which climate change has started affecting the human population in a very unprecedented manner, and there is spread of new types of diseases every other day. So the only hope for the future could be to find new solutions and also look back to our history to find the old ways which existed and live together in a sustainable manner so that we can continue to live for more years, so that the human civilization can survive for more and more years to come. And with this, we end our conversation for today. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe. If you have any comments or feedback about our video, please leave it in the comments below. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And thanks again. Please stay tuned for more. Bye.
Bye.